This is the position at the 18th move in the famous game between Garry Kasparov and Lajos Portisch, played in 1983. And this is the position at the 14th move in the equally famous game played between Lasker and Johann Hermann Bauer in 1889. And this video is going to explain how Garry Kasparov was able to use his knowledge of this position to win from this position almost 100 years later. Garry used what we call pattern recognition in chess, and I am here to explain to you how that works. First, let me highlight some pieces for you. I'm going to highlight the black king, and in fact all of the castle position from black. I'm also going to highlight these two bishops, and I'm going to highlight this pawn on b6 because why not? On the white side, let me highlight most of the castle position except this pawn here and the knight. Let me also highlight the queen and the bishop in these positions, and let me highlight this b2 bishop on the dark squares, but let me highlight it in green instead of red, and that will make sense in a little bit. Okay, so to recap, we have the highlighted pieces in the 1983 game between Garry Kasparov with white in this position and Lajos Portisch with black in this position. From here, let's travel back in time almost 100 years to this position right here. And what do we notice? We notice that all the pieces highlighted, all of these pieces are at the exact same squares as in the game played in the future from here. What about this guy? Well, the bishop here is highlighted green because it is not on the exact same square, but it is performing the same function. It is exerting influence over this long dark squared diagonal, and in particular it is attacking the pawn on g7. What I want you to notice about that is that the bishop, although it isn't on the same square, is performing the same critical function as the bishop in the other game, the game that we are going to look at. And that particular word, critical function, is what pattern recognition is all about. If you have ever tried to play chess, you probably know that it is an immensely complicated game, and that there are all these patterns interwoven with each other, and figuring out what pattern is the most relevant one is one of the really key components that makes a great chess player. This position right here is very, very famous, and I will briefly show you what happened. The critical thing was that Lasker was world champion at the time, longest reigning world champion in all of chess history, and an all-around amazing chess player and genius. In this position, he invented a new chess tactic, a pattern that had not been seen before, and executed it on the board. I will show the pattern so you understand how it works. From here, he wanted to attack the king with a deadly checkmate threat. Therefore, he did not come in with the queen and capture the knight, which looks like it's just up for grabs. Instead, he executed the double bishop sacrifice, starting with bishop takes h7. That is, of course, check. If you do not capture the bishop, the queen will come in and capture the knight, and it will be checkmate in 3 moves. Therefore, king takes bishop. Now, Lasker wants to capture the knight, and he can do so with check, not giving black time for any defensive maneuvers. Instead, he has to play the only legal move, king back to g8. This type of sacrifice of a bishop on h7 is known as the Greek gift, the Greek sacrifice. This was invented all the way back in the early 1600s and is not why this game is famous. It's the next move. Bishop takes g7, sacrificing another bishop. Now threatening queen h8 checkmate, therefore forcing king takes bishop. And as you can see, the emperor has no clothes, the walls of the castle has been torn down, and a rook lift, rook f3 to g3 will be very dangerous. However, we cannot execute this move immediately, rook f3 to g3, as this rook would slide out in response, allowing the king to come into this structure over here, which would allow him safety. Therefore, and I ask you to pay attention to this little subtle move, queen g4 is absolutely necessary, forcing king h7. Now the king is cut off from the escape. Rook f3, threatening to come in with a checkmate, forcing the only defensive option, advancing this pawn so that after rook h3 check, the queen can interpose. Rook takes queen, king takes rook, and in this position material is actually equal, but queen comes to d7, forking these 2 bishops. One of them moves, you can save one but not the other. This one is saved but the other falls. And Lasker went on to win pretty easily from this dominating position. If you want to learn about that game in much greater detail and learn about Lasker, then you can go and watch my last video on this channel, which was a historical breakdown of this entire game. Why did this work so well for Lasker? Well, he was able to sacrifice a lot of pieces, both bishops, because he saw that there was a bit of a miscoordination in the black army, and if the black king was exposed, he could take advantage of the fact that you cannot afford to lose the king. In chess, you lose the game if you lose the king, and therefore he could temporarily sacrifice a lot of pieces because he could get them back with advantage, because they could not come over and defend in a advantageous manner. Therefore, they would have to defend in an disadvantageous manner, giving him a great advantage. So now it's time to travel back to the future, which is also our past, to 1983 and this position right here. In this position, Portisch with black played bishop takes pawn on d5. And now it's time to execute the pattern. Bishop takes pawn, check. King takes bishop. And as you can see, this position, of course, it's a little different. So you have to handle the complications a little differently. For instance, here we play rook takes bishop, threatening the queen check on e4 with a deadly attack against the king. The king only has one move, which is the same as in the other game, has to go back to avoid the check. And now it looks like the king is safe and material is equal. However, the double bishop sacrifice will work its magic. Bishop takes g7. And again, you will have to capture this bishop. King takes bishop. And we notice that in the last game, in the other game, that when we had lured the king out with the second bishop, we also had a rook. That was the f rook in that game that we wanted to come in and coordinate with the queen for a checkmate attack. But some things were different, but some things, critical things, are the same. We would like to throw the same check. You remember the check on g4 to not allow the king to get to safety. That move is not possible here. So when Kasparov was calculating this position, he would have to look at this, think about the other game, think, okay, I need this check here. How can I make that work? If I can't make that work, the sacrifice is probably not going to work. And then he came up with a mechanism in his mind's eye as he was calculating the position, saying, okay, I can get time to play the queen check that I want by moving this knight to e5, as this comes with a lot of threats, and black will have to respond to those threats and cannot stop me from making this queen check. For instance, there is no way you could cover with the queen the check because we are very firmly controlling those squares. Also here, not possible, controlled by the queen, and also now controlled by the knight. So something like queen, offering a queen trick with queen to c4 does not work because of this knight. So he sort of built a little mechanism to make it work again. And this check is going to be fatal if the king will not have anywhere to run. And therefore the rook, we saw this mechanism in the last game as well, slides away. That is what Bauer would have wanted to play in the last game, but was not able to. Now Portisch is able to do it, but he's also facing a knight in the attack here. And now queen g4 check comes. Yes, the king does have an escape square, but the attack rages on. Queen to f5, threatening checkmate on this square. f7. Coordination by the knight and the queen. Portisch advanced the pawn so that there is no longer a queen takes f7 checkmate, and this pawn is now nicely defended by the bishop. But we have the same type of problem that we had in the other game. The king is too exposed and the queen can infiltrate. Working together with the less heavy pieces, the knight can come in and give a check from here. And from here the game is going to be quite different from the Lasker game, but getting from a seemingly equal position to a winning advantage used the same pattern, and the advantage is not the same in as the pieces are on the same squares, but it is the same type of advantage. An exposed king, and black will have to give up material or expose his king further in order to stave off checkmate. This check here forces rook takes knight. Kasparov gets further into the position. Extremely important here to play rook takes rook and not queen takes rook. An exchange of queens would absolutely lose the game for Kasparov because he's down too much material. So he has to understand what his advantage is. Being the exposed king, you need the powerful queen in this type of position to attack the exposed king. Therefore rook takes rook with an attack on the queen. And the queen would really love to exchange herself and trade off for the white queen, therefore queen c5. However, we are having none of that. Queen h7, threatening now moves like queen h8. If the queen ever drops the protection of this bishop, we have queen takes here with a mate in a few moves. So how can Portisch try to defend from here? One of the ideas in the position, if given a couple of moves, white would like to play the rook back. d3 is a nice square that's not attacked. And from here, swinging over to g3, coming down here with a checkmate attack. We see rook c7 trying to trade off the rook. The rook cannot come to the back rank with a check, leading to a potential checkmate that's covered by the bishop. The queen gives a check, forcing the king forward. We want the king to be as exposed as we can. And now we drop the rook, back for white, threatening again to come in and infiltrate on this side where we have softened up the defense to a point where it's not possible to defend. So this is sort of the critical weak area on this side of the board against the king. Okay, the knight will come in, and Kasparov changes his plans a little bit, saying, let me get my last rook into the game. Let me play rook on f to d1. Now controlling this square, this file here even more, and still maintaining the potential threat of coming to g3 with a checkmating attack against the king, squeezing every single drop of advantage possible out of the situation. Knight drops back to e5, an attack on the rook, also trying to cover some squares and be closer to the king. But Kasparov, known for his ruthless attacking style and mind-boggling ability to calculate very, very long lines, is completely on top of things here. He plays queen h7 check, forcing king towards the center. The center is now stronger for white because he had time to establish this battery of rooks. So he's winning on the king side, but he's also now winning in the center. Kasparov drives the king further up the board with queen check like this to the king, forcing either to interpose with the knight, which is losing, and also, or forcing rather, king to f7, which is also losing, because now we are getting black to do our work for us, pushing the king towards our pieces instead of having to push our pieces towards the king. So pawn to g4 is check. It doesn't work to capture this pawn with the knight. That's going to be checkmate in 5 moves. It looks like it's protected by the king, so we can't come in and snag the knight with the queen. But if knight takes pawn, rook f3 check forces the king away from the defense, Kasparov will capture the knight, and it's going to be from that position checkmate in 3 moves. Therefore, the king comes further towards our pieces. King to f4. We throw a check, driving the king even further towards our pieces. Rook d4 check, king f3. This is really not where you want the king to be. And what is the winning last precise move that is really needed here? And I can give you a hint that it is the move that statistically is the hardest type of move to spot in chess, which is a long backwards move. A long backwards diagonal move in particular. Queen all the way from this side of the board, showing her might as the strongest piece, showing her ability to quickly zoom from one side of the board to another side of the board. If the queen was trapped over here, maybe we could defend our king, because we do have a lot of pieces here, and if the queen was out of play, was offside, well, then maybe we could defend the king. But the queen showing her might on the long diagonal, queen to b3 with a check. The only legal king move, king to e2, does not work because queen e3 is checkmate. But interposing the queen like this also does not work, because when the queen is on c5, it's protecting d5, which has a dangerous white light square diagonal towards the king. But when you force the queen to move back, Kasparov can now take advantage of that diagonal. Again, the queen showing her might on the chessboard. King will now have to come to e2. Now we check again here, and of course it's not exactly checkmate because the queen can interpose. It's the only legal move. That is not a huge problem for Kasparov, as this queen is not defended by anything else than the king. And we could capture it with the pawn, of course, but why not capture it with the queen, which is checkmate. And that is the end of the game. I hope that you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed making the video. If you want some exclusive ASMR chess videos, patreon.com/ASMR chess is where you can go and support the channel and come hang out in the ASMR chess Discord and everything. I hope you had a good time watching this video. Thanks for watching.